Okay, I have the recording going. Thank you so much for doing this. I know that it's been an exhausting and you're so in demand. Would you please say your name with your title?
Okay. Um, my name, the way it spells out and the way it sounds in Spanish, is Marco Diaz Munoz. Spells out Marco, and my last name spells out D as in David, IAZ hyphen M as in Mary, U as in Union, N as in Nancy, O Z. And the N in Munoz is like onion, so Diaz Munoz. Oh, and my title, I'm assistant professor at Michigan State University.
So I know that you've been asked over and over again, about the details. I have read and watched your interviews, many of them, and I've read
Mhm.
many of the articles. So I'm not going to ask you to go through that again. What I want to know, since watching you since yesterday, what has happened since you first started telling this?
I'm sorry, what has happened since?
Since you first appeared in the media to tell the
Oh,
story about, what has happened in the last 24 hours.
well, there's been a stream of people and different networks and different agencies trying to interview me. It started with someone knocking at my door on Wednesday because I had basically used my prescription medication for insomnia to sleep for those 2 days to not remember what I had experienced. But then on Wednesday, I felt like I needed to write to my students and address, uh, so they kind of knew what was going on. So in the midst of my writing to them in the afternoon, someone knocked on my door, and it was a reporter with a notepad, no equipment, nothing that seemed kind of like my house was going to be invaded or anything. So, and she was very nice. So a young woman, so I allowed her in. Um, and she did an interview, Michigan Bridge, Michigan, something like that. And that was nice. That gave me an opportunity to share my views, not just my experience, but my views. And then she left, and then the next morning there was a line of people outside my place, my door. You know, CNN, NBC, New York Times, and on, the Detroit Free Press, and many, many different people. And at that moment, I felt, well, I mean, you can either say no or you can embrace it full force and take this opportunity to reach out to the nation. And I will never have an opportunity to have the microphone and express what I lived and the way I view what I lived and maybe influence politicians, lawmakers, and the American public in general. So I said, let's do it. And then by then, my experience, I think human beings have the capacity to compartmentalize things, and it's not even a conscious decision, your mind does it. So that the trauma is kind of being placed in a kind of a drawer in my mind, and I can close it or I can open it. But it's not right there in front of me all the time as it was the first few hours. So that allows me to speak to you, that allows me to speak to all these other people and share what happened on Monday, what happened to my students.
What has the response been? What kind of reaction have you gotten since you decided to tell your story?
Yeah, I have received tons and tons of emails of support from strangers across the nation, from students of mine that I taught 20 years ago. And one of the most moving was, well, I read many moving ones, but one of them was a kid that was my student at that very building. And when September 11th happened, and he said, "You may not remember me, but I remember you helping us get through the crisis of September 11th. And you were teaching us in that building. So I wanted you, she was, on and on and on about comforting me and thanking me for what I did 20 years ago. And I didn't remember that. And things like that. People that say, I had your class 3 years ago and you inspire me to learn and this and this and that. And I'm so sorry this has happened. So there's been a lot of support from former students, from people all over the country, across the nation, from the university, from the administration, my colleagues, my current students, and the ones that I guess it would be the most um, the ones that impacted me the most, other than that kid who wrote me 20 years ago, is my own students that escaped through the windows, the massacre, were checking on me, that wanted to know if I was fine, and that they were fine and that they were concerned about me. So, I think we became a family that out of that tragedy, where they cared about me and I cared about them. And that is the reason why, even though I have been offered by the university that I don't need to, go back and teach the rest of the semester, I feel the need to go back and teach, because I think those kids need me as I need them. Because together we need to pick up the pieces that were broken. And for them to go back to class and see a new professor that absolutely had no connection with what happened to them, teach them the rest of the semester. I wouldn't want that. I would want my professor that went through that trauma with me to be the one teaching me. So therefore, as a part of my healing and part of their healing, I think we need to be reunited in a classroom and, slowly ease into learning again. But I think seeing each other will be part of the healing, great part of the healing.
Do you think Monday is too soon? Are you ready to go back to class on Monday?
At the moment, my mind has put the experience in a box, like I said, and I think I can go. I don't know whether once I see them in class, I'm going to break down or not. I cried when I was in that class during that tragedy, seeing what had happened. And then the other part of me kind of saw it as a movie. It hadn't happened to me. I had the interesting opposite experiences where my students that were heroic in staying, because some of them escaped through the windows, some stayed to help the wounded. Those kids were not crying. They were just too busy trying to help their classmates. I didn't see them cry. But that doesn't mean they will not cry. That doesn't mean they're not going to cry inside at some point. They were in a mode of, I have to help my classmates. So that was selfless. They were focusing on helping their peers. And I know that they have their own grieving somehow, somewhere, at some point. So, so I don't know. I cried a lot then. I think I'm sure it will come back to me. I don't know if it'll come back to me when I see them in class or later, as I'm perhaps reviewing something, then all of a sudden some image or some word connects with our experience, and then the memories will come back.
There's a petition going around. Students are signing, so far there are about 20,000 who say that they would like to either do hybrid or virtual, and the university has said they haven't made a decision on that. Would you be okay with that?
Whatever I think the students prefer. I personally think that some of them, like I said, want to see me, and I want to see them, but I'm not going to be the one making that decision. So I'm willing to see them. I'm willing to finish the semester teaching them in a different building. away from where this happened. But I'm willing to do that, and I think part of me really needs that. I need to go back to my office. I need to go back and have a cup of coffee with my colleagues. I need to have a cookie. My colleagues sometimes bring cookies, cakes, things. I need to bring back some of my routine, some of what, normalcy, and then slowly ease into my evening class, which will be the challenging moment. But I'm open and wanting to do that.
And have you already been assured that you will be in a different building?
Yes, we've been assigned a different classroom in a different building. Yeah.
You talked about the response you've gotten, from former students. What about from lawmakers? Has anybody responded to you about working to change the law after hearing what you said?
Not lawmakers. Citizens, yes. The administration, yes. Activists, yes. General public, yes. Lawmakers, no.
So what would you like to see done as a result of this? Why are you so adamant about talking about this?
I don't want this to be a sensationalist piece of news, something to distract us from the day or shock us a little bit so that the day is more interesting. I don't want that to be the case. I want to present what happened to me, perhaps choose the words that really convey what I experienced so that the horror my class and I experienced moves some lawmakers into making the right decisions and touch their humanity, not their calculated decisions, political decisions, not whether they're going to gain or lose the support of donors, not whether they're going to affect, a segment of the population that believes in guns, but do the right thing. Because if their daughters if we're in the pool of blood that I saw Alexandria and Ariel, and I saw them dying, if they ever saw that, they would shut their mouths. They would be shamed into signing a change in the law. They could not say, well, let's be level-headed. Let's not rush into making, irrational decisions. We need to think this well, and we need to think this through. That is what a professional politician does, who's not really interested in serving the public, but is interested in maintaining a position of power for him or herself and his group of interests. That is not what a human being does. In fact, what I have been saying is the biggest changes in human history have not happened because people sat down and said, let's be level-headed, let's think this clearly and make rational decisions. The American Revolution was moved by people, moved emotionally to change things. The end of slavery didn't happen because anybody made a calculated, clear-minded decision. There were impassioned decisions. There were people that believed, that were touched in their hearts, and that's what made the change. Women were not granted the vote because of that process either. The civil rights didn't happen or were not pushed forward because people wanted to think clearly and logically and rationally. They were passed because their humanity was touched into doing the right thing. And some of our politicians and the public can decide which side of history they are going to be. Slavery ended because it had to end. Civil rights needed to be addressed, and they were addressed, and we're still addressing them. Women getting their votes happened. It was inevitable. LGBTQ issues that right now are a debate that shouldn't even be, will eventually also be addressed and passed. And you can decide whether you were the politician that were in the side of history or you were in the side of obstructing history. And you can also decide that as a citizen of this nation. Are you going to be on the side that you thought and worked towards improving the community? Or were you on the side of guarding your own comfortable position about me first, me second, and me third? I think that change, historical change, and I train my students to with a lot. They learn a lot from the ancient Romans to the present. Those changes, major historical changes, did not happen because people were, let's be, cooler jets. Let's just think this through. No, that's what a calculating politician does. Another thing is, and I'm sorry, it just crossed my mind. Some people argue, well, you need guns to defend yourself. Here is a first example of someone who was exposed to that violence. I, more than before, believe that I don't want to own a gun. What protects me is not a gun or a shield, something else. My feeling that I'm on the right side of history is what protected me that night to say this. And I think it's mathematics. If you have 400 guns floating around, it doesn't matter who owns them, criminals or good citizens. Or you have 50 guns floating around, I bet you there will be more deaths with the 400, no matter who owns them. And another one is, no one needs more than a pistol to defend themselves. Or no one needs a machine gun to go hunting in the fall. That is irrational. So the same people that on one hand argue, let's be rational, let's make a clear head decision, let's be rational, and on the other hand are justifying the completely irrational. So when I hear those arguments from politicians and I see through the sham, and I train my students to see through the sham of political rhetoric, that's part of why I do. I teach them to package capitalism as the solution to mankind. And then they are convinced. And then I switch and I do the opposite. And then I package communism as the solution for humanity. And then I package anarchy. And then they are confused. I thought he was a staunch believer in capitalism. Oh, I thought he was a communist. No, I'm just showing them that any politician with good rhetoric can give you a packaged, idea and try to sell it to you and confuse you as the public. I try to train them so they can see through that sham. So Hitler could have given you a very rational explanation for what he was doing. Putin can give you a very rational explanation for what he's doing, a very clear-headed and very good decision making about what he's doing. So do senators in Washington can give you that. But the public needs to see through that sham, and the interest groups of this nation, the gun lobby, the arms industry, they all use rhetoric to confuse the public. And I believe that decisions in this country need to be made because our humanity has been touched into making them, not because they are logical or rational.